I have a question. I can ask Leigh, please. One question regarding all those expeditions, all those dives that you did into the Britannic. You had so many options when we talked about you coming and doing this presentation. Why did you ended up by choosing the Britannic?
I think it's because I put a presentation together to take the audience on a underwater tour of famous ocean liners around the world. And I was a little bit ambitious with my presentation because I was only allowed 20 minutes. So I started taking things out and I was kind of only left with the thing at the end, the Britannic. And that's kind of why, really. But Britannic is visually impressive. It's not my favorite shipwreck in the world by any means, but visually she's impressive. She didn't actually do anything. She didn't have any great history. She's just a sister ship of Titanic, and she's just huge and massive, not like some of the wrecks that Tomas has been diving, where in the Baltic Sea it's massive history. But visually, she's quite stunning. I'm sure you've dived the wreck, haven't you? And there's several people here that have as well, and they'd agree with me. So yeah, for the visual impact, it's good for the audience to see such a massive shipwreck, I think.
You also mentioned, that you have ended up the writing of a book that talks about 30 years diving shipwrecks. Can you give us some more information about it? When can we find it on a bookshelf?
That's like a shameless plug for a book like Mark would do or something. So I've been writing a book for 30 years. It's taken 30 years to write because some of the things that happen at the end of the book, the technology simply didn't exist for us to do those expeditions when I first started writing it, which is why it's taken so long. So I have 50 chapters, 50 exciting adventures, and Britannic is just one of those adventures. And it's not my favorite adventure. There's adventures in the book that I prefer to Britannic. But yeah, it's a book of adventure, and I'm sure as divers, everybody would appreciate it. Tomas has also got a book, haven't you?
Yeah.
Tell them about your book.
No, I'm waiting for the question. Yes, from.
He has a lovely book on the Wilhelm Gustloff, showcasing some of the most fantastic photographs of probably, as he describes, maritime's biggest ever disaster. 9,000 to 10,000 people died on that ship. Huge. You think about the Titanic. Say for example, this gives you a perspective of how many people died on that wreck. You take the Titanic. How many?
1,700.
1,700 people died. Take, for example, the Lusitania. 1,500 people died on board that. Take, for example, a modern day disaster like the Twin Towers. 2,500 people. It's not until you take those three disasters, combine them together, and you still haven't got half the amount of people that died on this one shipwreck. But like Tomas said, it's a shipwreck that's gone forgotten. And I think it's gone forgotten because it was at the end of the war and people were suppressed by war by this point. Millions of people had died in the trenches and everywhere else around the world and in the concentration camps. So 10,000 people on one shipwreck was just gone amiss. Would you agree?
We all love the story about the biggest, the longest, the maximum, and so on. And I am really surprised that Wilhelm Gustloff is not so famous, if we want to say it like this. And the answer is very simple. The Germans, they are not so proud of this because they were occupant, yes, and even if they lost 9,000 people, they don't want to remind everybody all the time about this. The Russian, even if they sank and it was in the war big success, they don't want to tell more about the story because they were not absolutely sure that they are hero or they are killers, yes. So they don't want to tell too much this. And the last part is the Poland. This is on our current territorium, but before war, it was not our territorium, yes? So there are 3 countries and none of them that are interested to talk about this. And I am the big, enthusiast to, if we can say like this about the graveyard, that we have to do it something with this. And Guslow is not protected against the unlegal dive. This is, when I say to the people about this, everybody are very surprised because the Guslow is, the diving is forbidden on the Guslow, and that's all, yes? And forbidden means that the legal divers never go there, but unlegal divers from the other countries go there and just for penetration, yes? So this is the worst way to protect the Guslow and the Goya and the others. We as a Baltic there are promote this kind of system that the divers can dive once or twice per year on this wreck just to control the current situation. And we want to copy the idea which we see in the Malta, Timmy Gabin, they make some program to protect the local wrecks, and exactly they make like this, that they invite the diving center, the divers and the fishermen to protect the wrecks, because nobody else can protect divers better like a divers, yes? So this is about the Guslow.
I have a question that's for all 3 of you. They were 3 fantastic stories, 3 fantastic presentations. What's the next story? What's the next project you guys are looking to get involved with?
Finishing my book. There's one more chapter to write, HMS Victory, for me. I think expeditions, they come along and they crop up. I've got no big ones planned as such. There's still ongoing work on Britannic as we speak today. One of my best friends, Richie Kohler, has made a dive to Britannic, continuing the internal investigations. But I'll personally continue diving shipwrecks in the English Channel, where there's more shipwrecks per square mile than anywhere else in the world. 4,000 known shipwrecks. I don't have a lifetime to dive those. My dive partner and I estimated that we dived around about 400 virgin shipwrecks in the heyday of technical diving. But I think the new frontier, realistically, it has to be the Baltic Sea. There's so many fabulous, so much history in that ocean. That's the new frontier. If that's where I would go.
About me is I would like to find the cockpit of aircraft, because it will close the story. And at the moment, I'm in another page of my history of diving. I'm more concentrated in caves. So we'll see. There are some projects going on, so we'll see what's happened.
Yeah, and if you ask me about the project, I live in the wreck paradise, so I can perhaps dive till to end of my life of the virgin wrecks. But when you are getting older, you are more interested in the story instead of the wreck like they are. And I think that the most important is to how you say, to convince divers to responsible diving. Yes. 20, 30 years ago, I was interested to find some artifacts and some bell and something like this. And now that promote the story about wrecks is more important, like took a picture of this wreck. So this is the next project for me and for the Baltic Tech team.
Like I said earlier on, right at the start, this is the golden age of shipwreck discovery. These wrecks are collapsing and falling away. I've personally seen it. I'm sure these guys have as well. So now we've all got a responsibility as our generation of divers to go and photograph those shipwrecks, as many of you doing. Brandy did in her presentation, didn't you? So yeah.
Are we ready for the next question? So it appears to be the common consensus that when you find human remains in shipwrecks, and I imagine plane wrecks as well, to leave them be. Does it ever happen that family that is still alive the next of kin to the people that were in the wreck and died in the wreck, that they actually would prefer the remains to be taken out of the water to give them a burial, to have a place to bury them rather than leave them in the wreck sites?
You know, to be honest, on the Baltic wrecks there are a lot of bones, yes, because a lot of people die, yes, and what we can do it, we can tell about this story more about to avoid situation that the story will be forgotten, yes. But if you ask about families, I had opportunity to meet some families, and all of them, they are not interested to pick up this rest. Yes, absolutely. They are more interested to identify the body. Yes, if we a few years ago we found the U-88, the Junkers. Yes, and the 2 Germans died, and one body was found by fishermen after this accident in 1943. So when we find the rest and some bones on the bottom, we are absolutely convinced that that we know the name of this guy, and we let the family, and they were absolutely happy to know where is the place when the grandfather died, and that's all. And you know, after 75 years, the people do not have the same emotion like during the disaster. Yes, so for them it's mostly kind of information. Yes, the family react very positive, but some historians, they are so aggressive sometimes. So I had some letters from German historians: do not touch this and do not dive. But they are not families. Families, they are always very open for cooperation and for some information.
I was lucky enough to be on the discovery of a U-boat. We dived many U-boats, but one particular U-boat, there was just one guy that survived, and it sank in a depth of 75 meters, and it was depth charged by British destroyers on the surface. And this guy survived by opening the hatch and then just coming up, holding his breath from 75 meters, and arrived on the surface. But before he opened the hatch, the water had to equalize inside, so it was completely submerged. And he obviously watched all his colleagues in that U-boat die. They drowned. He was the only one that survived. And for years, I tried to track this guy down to find him. And eventually, I got a letter from somebody in Canada saying, yeah, your guy that survived this, German that just survived this U-boat is alive and living in Canada. And for many years, my friend said to me, you know, he won't talk to you even if you find him, because they're Nazis and they were suppressed by the war and they don't want to talk about it. They just clam up. So I wrote back to this person. I said, how do you know him? And he said, oh, it's my father-in-law. I said, do you think he'd tell me his story? He said, I'll tell you his story. There isn't anyone within a 50-mile radius that hasn't heard the story 10 times over. So they do want to talk about the stories, but I wouldn't say they want to, like when you found the submarine, what about the families? They didn't want to raise.
HMS Narval, yeah.
But yeah.
In case of the civil aircraft, the story is a little different, because when you find a wreck of civil aircraft, you have to report it to the authorities and special authorities, the aircraft authorities. And then it's quite complicated, because you have to report, and they have to report to the country which designed the aircraft, the country which designed the engines. So the country with the passengers, and the country of the company. So we have to report the found to all these countries. For what? For investigating for why, if the engines fail, if the plane fail, if which countries and which peoples were there, to report to the peoples, that families. So there are a lot of bureaucracy in this case, and we had to go to the authorities of the aircraft reporting all of this. But because the aircraft was already sunk 50 years almost, So, and the aircraft is not an active aircraft, it's our old aircraft. So all of these fall down, except if you found some bones or somehow you can found it, and maybe you can found them, you can contact them, the families. Otherwise, just keep it as it is and don't mess more.